Does President Obama really think no one at Fox will see a government spy in our newsroom? Tonight, an FCC commissioner goes on the record and blows the whistle on a plan to install spies in newsrooms. They can call it something else, like a monitor, but no one's that stupid. We know exactly what they're trying to do. The FCC commissioner who blew the whistle is here to go on the record. Commissioner Ajit Pai joins us. Nice to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so your op-ed has blown the whistle on this. Tell me exactly what is it the FCC wants to do and why you wrote your op-ed.
So the FCC is proposing to do what it is calling a critical information needs, or SIN, study. And as a part of this study, they will be sending researchers into newsrooms across the country, television and broadcast and newspapers, to try and figure out why they cover the stories that they do. And they've identified 8 categories of news that they think news people should be covering. And some of the questions they ask are hardly technical. They're asking reporters, for example, have you ever wanted to cover a story and been told by the management that you can't do so? And so as I looked into the study design, I got a little more concerned about what this implicated for our First Amendment values. And that's why I wrote the editorial that you mentioned in the Wall Street Journal.
What's been the response by the other members of the FCC? I
haven't talked to all of my colleagues, but I am pleased to report that tonight the chairman of the FCC, Tom Wheeler, has instructed the contractor who will be doing this study to remove from the study relating to news philosophy and editorial judgment. And I think that's a positive step, but of course the devil's in the details when it comes to the actual study as implemented.
You know, it may be a positive step, but who in his I mean, you'd have to be out of your mind to have proposed this in the first place. I mean, so like, you know, yeah, I suppose that's great that the commissioner has now, after everyone is raining all over his parade, but who in his right mind suggested this in the first place or thought it was okay to send monitors into newsrooms?
So the study was designed and adopted under previous leadership, and I think the reaction that you have is the one that a lot of people in America have, and that is that the government doesn't have a place in the newsroom. One of the things that's made this country great is the fact that news for themselves what stories to cover and how to cover them, and especially in a marketplace as competitive as this one, they don't need the government over their shoulders telling them that they're doing something wrong.
Has any money been spent so far to do this?
As far as I know, no. The study hasn't yet started, and that's why I think it's critical for us to make sure at the outset that either we stop the study or if it's going forward, we make sure that it doesn't infringe on anyone's constitutional freedoms.
What is sort of the authority for the FCC even to think that that it can do this? What's the statute that they think that they must comply with?
So technically, the FCC is relying on a statute that requires the FCC to report to Congress every 3 years on barriers that entrepreneurs and small businesses face when they're trying to get into the communications industry.
Stop there. What does asking a question about whether or not you've been prevented from telling a story have anything to do with being a barrier?
And that's exactly the concern I have, that there isn't any connection. And moreover, even if there were some connection, the FCC doesn't have any regulatory authority when it comes to the print media. And so we don't tell newspapers what to cover, and newspapers nonetheless are covered under this SIN study.
And yet this was included. Newspapers are included, yet you have absolutely no authority to do that.
Exactly right.
All right. The other thing is barriers to entering the field. Is that right?
Right.
With the Internet, what in the world barrier is there to getting information out there? Want to get information out there.
And this is one of the great ironies of this story, is that what characterizes the media marketplace in 2014 is that consumers have an unparalleled amount of choice. They can go online, they can find a broadcast network that they like, they can go on cable news, they can go to a newspaper. And so given that they have so many choices, and given that there's so many people competing to provide them the news that they want, there's really no reason for the FCC to inject itself into the editorial judgments of all these people.
Do you see this as a government attempting to pressure news organizations?
I'm not sure what the intent behind it is, but what I can tell you is that a lot of folks that I've heard from the industry are telling me that they are worried about the inadvertent coercion that might happen if the FCC says, look, we're just asking questions. Well, if you're holding a broadcast license that the FCC issues, you're not going to feel like it's entirely voluntary if you have to answer this battery of questions that's in this 70-some page study.
All right, now it's not even the FCC that's even going to be doing this, is that the FCC hires outside people to do this. So we even have to spend money, if this were ever to happen. Frankly, I can't imagine any newsroom letting a government agent come in and do that. But is that the FCC hires a contractor, so the American taxpayers are paying for these spies, as I call them, to come into the newsrooms?
That's correct. The FCC is hiring contractors to do this study.
And is the commissioner, in your conversation with him, does he now think, like, what was I thinking when I thought this was okay? I know he's now trying to amend the questions, but does he have any sort of back off at all and think that this is just a really bad idea?
Well, in fairness to the chairman, he wasn't leading the agency when the study was designed.
Does he have the power to say no?
He does have the power to say no, and I'm hopeful that he and my colleagues will come to embrace the basic principle that, again, the government has no place in the newsroom.
Commissioner, thank you very much. I can tell you one thing is that your op-ed has certainly been very helpful, to the First Amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
And now the FCC may say it is not trying to muzzle journalists, but members of the Energy and Commerce Committee are not buying it. Congresswoman Renee Ellmers is on. She joins us. Congresswoman, what do you make of this study by the FCC to put people in newsrooms to monitor, in their word, to spy, in my word?
Well, there again, I have a lot of questions, as you do. Why is the FCC pursuing this study? What information are we going to gain with it? And what will happen with the results in the end? I just believe so strongly in the First Amendment. This is one more attempt by the Obama administration to trample on the Constitution.
For the life of me, I can't even figure, it's one thing for one person to come up with a really stupid idea. Maybe the one person who's never heard of the First Amendment and the importance of freedom of the press. You find that one person. But something like this actually has to go through several layers before we ultimately get it out to a contractor. So there are a lot of people at the FCC, not this commissioner, but there are a lot of other people at the FCC knew exactly what was happening with this and looked the other way.
Well, and, to the point, the commissioner that was on with you just a moment ago, if he hadn't put his op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. The Energy and Commerce Committee, the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology, and Chairman Upton, we reached out with a letter to Chairman Wheeler on this issue. This is $1 million that they're paying for this study, and they're actually telling us that if there are changes that have to be made, it's going to increase cost, so it's going to cost the taxpayers even more money. So not only are we infringing on Americans' rights as a country and the ability for free speech, but we're actually making the taxpayers pay for it as well.
All right, well, in a letter from the FCC, from the chairman to Chairman Upton, one of the justifications, or the justification for spending all this money to put spies, as I say, into newsrooms, is that it says the Communications Act, Section 257, directs the Commission to identify and eliminate market entry barriers for entrepreneurs, small businesses in the provision and ownership of telecommunications services and information services. What in the world is the barrier in light of the fact that we now have the internet and anybody can put any video on, any information? It doesn't cost a dime. You just need to have access to a computer terminal.
Well, exactly. This is a multimedia study, and they're saying that it's critical information needs. Now, there again, so subjective. What will the Commission do with this information? How will they utilize it? And there again, it's the Commission that actually licenses broadcasting. So, this is something that could be very potentially dangerous for America. This is just the Freedom Doctrine 2.0. Fairness Doctrine 2.0.
I would expect that no newsroom in this country would let a government monitor into it. I can't, in my wildest dreams, I don't know any news organizations that would. But let me ask you, what are you going to do about it? What's your committee going to do about it? Even if you say no, the fact is you've got an FCC that truly doesn't understand the purpose of freedom of the press, and that's very serious.
Well, you pointed that out. Freedom of the press, so important. What news agency is going to be able to have free thinking in their newsroom if there's someone that's doing this study in the newsroom listening? It's just, you can see the influence that they're going to have. What we're going to do, we started with the letter to the chairman, and I'm sure we'll be having subcommittee hearings after this. This is a very important issue and one that the American people are going to need us to address.
Well, I hope you ask for some heads, because this is not just a little problem. This is apparently it's gone all through the FCC, because I can't believe it's just one person. Not one person could just go out and hire someone and spend the money. But this was an idea that has gone all through different layers at the FCC. You have a very serious problem if you think that not you, but if the FCC thinks that it can go marching into newsrooms and ask probing questions. It really doesn't understand freedom of the press.
Absolutely. It's just the fairness doctrine all over again, and it's going to infringe on free speech.
Nice to see you, Representative.
Good to be with you, Greta.